Hey everyone, Chris Sawyer here. The Varietal Show is back. We've got a great show today. It's kind of like we're Men in Black because we are Men in Black right now. I am in LA. I am in Los Angeles, California, basically Sherwood Oaks.
Sherman Oaks, yeah.
Sherman Oaks. But the great thing is, I came here for a lot of different purposes. I'll be judging the LA International Wine Competition, but there's someone special that I knew was here, and that is the great Troy Christian. You guys might not know Troy Christian like I know Troy Christian, and Troy and I met back in 2013, and he made a movie called The Perfect Vintage. Now, your brother is a great winemaker friend of mine, Timothy Milos. Some of you might know him. He's made a lot of wines for different wineries in Napa Valley, primarily, a little bit in Sonoma County. A really great winemaker, and he just happens to be your brother. And this movie was made about the 2013 vintage, which was one of those perfect vintages. If you could get the grapes right, if you could do everything perfectly, if you could do everything right, you could make a perfect wine. And that's what this movie's about. And in 2013, I got a call from your brother, and he said, you know, my brother Troy is making a movie, Chris. I want you in it really bad, and I think this is a great opportunity for you. And I said, this is a little tip on where it was filmed too, my little part. I said, you know, I can't really make it over to Napa, but if you guys could make it over here, I've got a friend up the street that has a nice little winery. That was Hoot Smith in Castagna Vineyard at the time, up the street, and that's where my little part in the movie is filmed. So this is 2013, you guys, and I kind of forgot about it. Every time I thought about Timothy, I'd go, oh man, that was so fun filming with you and your brother and everything. Guess what? I was, last year, which would be 2021, I was at the Sonoma International Film Festival doing the wine judging there, and someone said, Chris, you're in a movie that's coming up. I'm like, oh, what? Huh? And it was none other than Troy's movie. And this was a wonderful thing. One of the reasons, like, I could say that, and like, he made a cool movie. The movie's gotten a lot of credit, you guys, and that's where we're at today. And this is a very special thing. I don't like to put time in these references in my show because it can be shown at any point. But this March, which we're in right now, this film is going to go for national release. This is not your typical documentary about just people playing around in wine country. This is a really serious one, and it got such great recognition at so many film festivals that it got taken, and it's a big deal, you guys. It's coming out later this month, and if you really think about it, it's the first documentary on wine since Somm, the movie Somm, that's been nationally distributed. And I think that this is a great thing. So nice to be here with you, Troy. Obviously, I brought some wine, a little Chapelet, of course. Mountains, actually, Chapelet and Carmenet were in existence at the same time. They were just on different mountains. That was their thing. So this is a little Chapelet, a mountain cuvee. I thought this would be a fun thing because kind of the big vineyard in this movie is on the mountains, and it's a hidden destination, and so was Chapelet way back in the late 60s when it was really started to be developed. But here we are. Before we go into the movie, I mean, this all started about your passion for wine. What got you into this?
Well, you mentioned it first off. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. It's always good to have a winemaker in the family. So Timothy, being such a great winemaker, I'm kind of a question asker. So I'd go up to visit and we'd be hanging out and I'd be sipping some of his wine, and I just started asking questions and saying, well, how do you do this? And what is that about? And what's this? Tell me about tasting notes. Tell me about. And in speaking with him, I was going, wow, this is actually an amazing topic that maybe we should do something. So I was looking at the time for a passion project to do, and it was end of 2012. And so Timothy and I talked about it and said, hey, let's do a film on wine, and we did.
Isn't that fun? I mean, and the fact is that a lot of the editing and everything, I mean, you had some time to do this, especially touch-ups and stuff in 2020. If you guys remember 2020, something happened then when you had a lot of time. And this really became a time when you could take this film and really kind of, you know, it could go to some people that really needed to see this film. Like, it was more important than ever when it was released, I think, and especially the amazing film festivals that it got, like best documentary in so many film festivals, you guys. And that's why it's not just about a love of wine. It's about a real true art of making the highest quality wines we can in America, and it's based on what they did in Europe and all over the world. So it's amazing that your brother and you really hooked up together and really followed that passion. It's a double passion. Obviously, Timothy is a great winemaker.
Really
I love
great
this man.
winemaker. Yeah.
And it was amazing for me to be in there in the movie and really talking about the wine that's kind of the legendary wine in this, which was, you know, it's called Hidden Ridge at the beginning, this vineyard that's like a site that's like unbelievable. And I got to know Timothy a lot from back in the, you know, early 2000s when he was making the wine. This site is one of the most ridiculous sites in America. I mean, I'm just telling you guys, it is so I mean, it's like, why did they plant this? I mean, it makes no sense. Like, you're in the middle of nowhere, and you make a vineyard that looks almost exactly like the Douro region in Portugal, where they make the great port wines. But it goes like this out of the mountains, and it's total terracing. That, like, why did these people do this in the middle of nowhere?
It's called Hidden Ridge Vineyard for a reason, because it's hidden high. I think it's on Spring Mountain, right? As you drive from St. Helena up over the hill, you make a left on some dirt road, and then you drive back about a mile and a half.
You think the Deliverance song is going to play the minute you get off the road?
I'm pretty sure I heard banjos as soon as I took that left turn. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a site that I had gotten aware of before. And when we really started to taste this wine that we're talking about, it really, I believed it because I'd been to that site. I've seen what its potential is, but it's very hard to capture it. It's just a very hard nosed bargain because it's just such a rugged kind of terrain.
Yeah. It's really it's an extreme. Some of the wines are called 55% slope and stuff like that. They're named after the topography of the vineyard. But I will say this before we go on. I just want to say thank you to you before we sip. But cheers to your beautiful performance in it, because he does an amazing job. And I actually learned a lot listening to you in the film. That you have some good funny moments because he's talking about the fruit that's on that vineyard. And he said, it's pretty, those grapes are a little angry. They've got some attitude. They're a little pissed, quote directly from the movie. And it's true. They're all struggling up there. But you talked a lot about chaparral and mountain herbs and the things that make that type of a vineyard so distinctive. And it was a good lesson for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I want to say a few of the people that are in this movie. Obviously, we've got some great wineries. The newer name of the vineyard is Immortal Estate, which pretty much Immortal Estate. It's one of the places that I would say it lives up to it. Don't worry. I mean, it really does. We also have like Belong and Bounty Hunter. If you guys ever know Bounty Hunter for downtown Napa, they're in it. Brasswood, the great place right there near Calistoga, between St. Helena and Calistoga. Great winery, great place.
With Angelina Mondavi.
With Angelina Mondavi, who I want to get into in a minute, because Angelina Mondavi is one of my great friends, and she's in the movie too, and so is Elizabeth Viana, who is from Chimney Rock. If you guys ever have Chimney Rock wines, she is in there too. And one of the great things is that these are very dear friends of Timothy as well, winemaker Timothy.
I like to Timothy and I joke a lot that he was actually the casting director on the film, because it's really Tim's circle of friends, you included, and it's a beautiful thing to have all those people together who know each other and like each other. That's another thing I learned about the wine industry. So many industries are so competitive, right? But you guys, it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and it's the rising tide raises all ships. You guys are so giving to each other, and as far as advice and going through the same thing, it's a really good thing to witness.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of challenges out there in the wine industry. It looks beautiful, and it kind of is beautiful, but it's not easy to make world-class wine. And me, not being the winemaker, but being an international wine writer for 30 plus years and a sommelier for 30 plus years, I've gotten to follow these people, and they're dear friends of mine because I've seen what they've been able to accomplish. Every vintage is so different. 2013 to me is one of the greatest vintages of the past 25 years, at least, in Sonoma, Napa, everywhere in this area. It just had the right balance of the climate was in control. The fruit set at the very beginning of the year in the springtime was good. And that's hard. Sometimes you get all this shatter and all these bad things happen, and you get this rain, and sometimes there's hail and all these things. That didn't happen. It was like a really perfect set.
Mother Nature was in a good mood.
Yeah, she was in a good mood. And this is coming off of 3 vintages that were very strange. First of all, 2010, we got hit by a hardcore heat wave that really kind of decimated a lot of grapes because people thought, well, if we just cut off the cover crop or the canopy, and we just do that and we just kind of give them a little bit more exposure, that'll be good. Well, it didn't happen that way. It kind of got really super hot, and the sun started frying the grapes. That was not good. Next year, looking really good, and then it starts raining. So then you have bunch rot, where you've got the cluster and it's got some rot going on in it, and you're like, wow. The year after that, 12, was a very good year, and it was almost too good. It wasn't the quality that 2013 was, but it was giving you so much grape. And the thing was, most winemakers didn't have enough capacity to handle how much grape was coming in.
Fighting over space.
You're pretty much making it in bathtubs at this point because there was just too many grapes. So this one had everything. It had the balance. The 2013 vintage, to me, is just something I'll always look back on. And the wonderful thing about it is we could taste it then, as we did, and we could talk about it then. But these wines are still young today because that's what kind of stature they have and why they're so special to us. Not only myself, but I will say Ian Blackburn is in this movie too, and he's my dear friend from down here in the Los Angeles area, one of the greatest educators in the business, and my fellow sommelier and my fellow wine judge. And I want to say that I was completely honored to be in the movie. I was completely honored that you picked Ian and I, of the 2 sommeliers of the nation that really care so much. I mean, I feel like we are not only sommeliers that can talk internationally, but we are sommeliers of California, and we care about this state so much. And there's a lot to this state. It's not just about Napa. Napa is very small, you guys. It's the most popular, maybe. I think it's easy to argue that, and I live in Sonoma County. Don't get me wrong. I love Sonoma County, but the fact is, it just has a charm to it that really, we thank Robert Mondavi, and we thank a lot of people that really marketed it well and did the right thing. It's about 4%, 5% of the production of California is Napa Valley. That's not much. Sonoma County is a lot more than that. But it has, when it can be a perfect vintage, you can just, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. And we saw it in 2013. Yeah. For you, as a consumer, and filmmaker, obviously, and the head of this amazing project. I mean, you were tasting these 2013 vintage wines. What did it seem like to you? What was different to you?
Well, I feel so fortunate to actually that year have the experience of not only tasting the wines, but tasting that really freaking good grape juice, right? And tasting it when it's just been picked and it's and then tasting it throughout the process. Oh, it's halfway to wine. Mm-hmm. It tastes like this. So I would say that my palate, since doing the film, has grown a lot, and it's still growing because there's so much to learn and so many things to try. And I'm always amazed at how well you guys, those schnozzes and taste buds on you guys work so well. I feel honored to have been able to taste it, and for me personally, it elevated my palate. Once you start tasting balanced wines that are made well, crafted with care and passion and all of that, you really can't go back to the $8 bottle of, Safeway wine. You get spoiled. It sucks because it's a lot more expensive.
It's a lot more expensive, you guys, just if you didn't get that memo, but it is. It's worth it. These are things that when you have those moments and you share this wine with someone special and you get to talk about it, and you get to talk about wines like this that you saw a movie made about, especially that 2013 vintage. Maybe you'll never have this wine from the Immortal Estate that came out back a while ago, and got a lot of points, 100 points, and this kind of stuff. But it's about taking this vintage and talking about that is more important to me. It doesn't matter the numbers and what someone rates it, or if it gets a gold or double gold or best of class or best of show in these competitions that I judge. It's really about how they hold up over time. They really show you these things. And I think as a judge, and I'll talk on behalf of Ian too, one of those clues for us is great acidity. It's got to be lively. It can't just taste like a bunch of oak barrels. It's got to taste like the fruit. Fruit first, because it's got to have that personality of the vineyard, and it's got to have acidity, because if it doesn't have acid, it's just grape juice. And so what's the point of this? And if it has too much oak, that's where the balance thing comes back in. If it has too much oak, are we paying for the oak barrels, or are we paying for a great wine? That's a problem that I have, and sometimes those do not get good ratings from me because they are too oaky. And I just, I want to taste a place, and when I taste these wines, and this wine that we're talking about, you could taste that place. I mean, I'd been to that place, and I knew exactly what this wine had the potential to taste like, and it did.
Right, and that's what you'll learn a lot about in the film is terroir and the sense of place, because we're talking to all these different winemakers who talk about where they are and what they did and how they got the wine in the glass and what that was like. And it's a sense of place is a magic thing if they can nail it. And
Absolutely.
The winemakers in the film do a great job of that exact thing.
Yeah, how they hold up too over time. Like I said, I mean, these are wines that you put away for 15 to 25 years, and you keep telling stories about them because they're still good. That's what balance is about. It's making a wine that's not just the here and now. It's also got the potential to age, and that wine was amazing. And I give some credit to here we are tasting some Chapelet right now, which is another amazing story, a journey that this family, the Chapelet family, took, and they went to a place that no one really knew any potential things there in Napa Valley, up on the Vaca mountain range. Now Tim Mondavi has amazing continuum just down the street, and there's all sorts of other amazing wineries that have their property up there. But this is back in late 60s that they were doing this, and I went to the 50-year anniversary of theirs, and I think that this is a really good example of a mountain fruit based wine that is basically about 77% Cabernet and Merlot, but it does have the Malbec, the Petit Verdot, and a little bit of Cabernet Franc in it too, which are all grown on their estate. So the estate concept that we were talking about with this wine is a lot like this. On a mountain, this is the wine that is featured in this film is from the Mayacamas Mountains, and that is the mountain between Napa and Sonoma counties. This one is between basically Napa, Silverado Trail. You go up in the mountains east of Silverado Trail, and that's where this is. It's an amazing
So
back road.
south of Howell Mountain then?
It's south of Howell Mountain, absolutely. This is not an official appellation, but we've all known it as Pritchard Hill
Pritchard
because
Hill,
of that's what they logged it in as, and it's been Pritchard Hill ever since. So to us in the industry, this is an appellation, what we'd call almost like a monopole, but it doesn't have one winery. It has a lot of different small vintners that have estates there, and there's something about mountain fruit that is so different than the valley floor. I think we really go into that in this movie, and that's a really important part. And speaking of which, one of our great people that was part of this movie is Tom Graves. And Tom Graves, really, you and he really work together. He works for NASA, you guys.
Yeah.
And this man knows his drones, and he knows his lenses, and he knows how to capture things. And that's why I think, your part is so integral in everything. But if you really want to see what wine country is, you watch this movie, because these images of what that vintage was about and what was really happening, it was unbelievable. Tell us a little bit about how you and Tom came together.
Well, Tom and I had worked on a couple of projects before. I was directing a theater show, and he was helped me with this. I was directing an award show because I do a lot of theater. Aside from movie, I do live events as well. So we worked together on that, and then I started hiring him on a few jobs that I had. And when we first started the project, one of the interesting things that happened was, throughout the process of making the movie, technology changed so much. We went from a GoPro drone to a Mavic Pro to a Mavic Pro 2. And what Tom brought to the movie especially is this bird's eye view of that area. It's just being able to see, there's views that, because my brother lived there, and because Tom and I had such a good time doing this together, we would just, where do you want to go today? And we would explore and take these back roads and just, hey, we've never turned down that road before. Let's go down there, and then get the drone up in the air. So you get a really great opportunity to see so much of Napa. And so Tom really brought that whole thing to it as well, which was just awesome.
Yeah, people talk about that. They've seen the movie. They, oh my God, those images. Oh, geez. But I think it just really helped bring home all the points that were being made in this movie. I mean, we have a lot to talk about. That vintage was such a good vintage. But Tom or Timothy had his challenges, and Tom had to capture what this kind of construction was, as far as like, this is a really rugged piece of property that he was working with, and the grapes are coming off these mountains, and it really goes down to, where does it all start? It's about farming. It's about finding the sites. And why are they special? Why did the the Chapelets go out of their way to go to a place that was not popular up in the mountains above Napa Valley? Was not a popular place, but they did it. And the same thing with this vineyard that is featured in the movie. It's going to a place that there's something special here. We just have to capture it. And I think that the farming techniques there, and a lot of the things that you captured in the film, and just about bringing that fruit in, and almost like you can taste it in the screen, those grapes, and why they're so important, these clusters, and why they're kind of compact, and that's an important thing. If they're big, bunchy things, that's not really a great Cabernet vineyard. A small cluster, much more. Now we're talking about a really great world-class vineyard. And it's because they have to struggle. And like I said, these vines do have attitude. They're pissed most of the time because they really have to work hard. But it pays off when you taste these kinds of wines, these world-class wines.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about this. What am I about to taste here?
What I like about it, why it
I feel like I'm
differs
getting
a little
a free
bit.
lesson right
this
now.
is this is a little bit different. This is called the Mountain Cuvée. So this is they pick all their grapes from the vineyard, and it's kind of like Timothy does too. What's the 55% slope that winery made, and they start with knowing where these grapes are at. They bring them in slowly but surely, these different plots, these different blocks inside the vineyard. So this is a good example of exactly what was happening in that movie. This is a 2018 vintage, much more showy vintage. I'll just say this for you guys, if you want one really good lesson about the 2010 to 2019 vintage, is the even years, pretty, except for that 2010, pretty darn yummy when they're young. They're just kind of showy. They're kind of good. And this is just tasting good. It's
Tasting
about
good already.
texture right now. It's not really showing. It's like vibrant parts where it's almost like the Cabernet is super identifiable over here, and the Merlot is super identifiable over here. It's kind of like a perfect blend where it's just a kind of a seductive, sexy wine right now, which is okay with us.
Yeah.
But
Sexy's
it's just
good.
it's got a lot of dark fruit in there, but it has blue fruit characters too, and that's that little bit of blueberry cassis kind of characteristic. Sometimes we'll use a little bit of reference to boysenberry too, which is almost more of a blue fruit. And we really get into it, and it's kind of richness, natural richness. So it's not that kind of crazy red fruit, not the wild strawberries, raspberries, plums, cherries, things like that. It's not that kind of brambly blackberry that you go down the creek and go like this. This is a mountain fruit selection.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more of a sage kind of characteristic in here, which is like, for me as the the sommelier and the writer, I think about duck. I want some duck with this. I want a good pork dish that's got some depth to it, because this is not just about Cab. This is a Cab, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot blend. And Petit Verdot is becoming a kind of a big deal in Napa Valley, you guys. And Petit Verdot is more about color, and so we can see the color is fairly dark in here. Cabernet Franc being the great father of Cabernet Sauvignon. Believe it or not, you guys, if you've never heard this, you heard it right here on the Varietal Show. Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc were crossed together to create a super grape called Cabernet Sauvignon. So Cabernet Sauvignon did not exist 500 years ago. Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc definitely did.
They made a good baby.
They made a good baby, and Merlot is a baby of
I enjoy their baby a
Cabernet
lot.
Franc too. Yeah, it's a good baby. But when you get into Petit Verdot and especially Malbec and things like that, Malbec has a spiciness to it, and you get that kind of underlying thing on the back end, that licorice, that kind of almost like allspice kind of note to it, which is clove, black pepper, and nutmeg and cinnamon and things like that, and you got it in there.
Yeah.
But it's not really a lot of new barrels in here. It's a lot of balance between 1 year, 2 year, as well as new barrels. So it's not about showing the real craftsmanship of the super winemaker and really taking that time. It's about showing the great blend of the vineyard as a whole, and a mountain vineyard at that. And that's really, to me, is really important, and why I wanted to bring it to you, since this movie is really based on a mountain vineyard and a wine that came out of that, but also our appreciation for the difference between Napa Valley proper and what Napa Valley wines that are made with fruit from the mountains are. They're very different from one another. This tends to be a lot more intensive. This one is a presentable, wonderful one that drinks well young, and it's from a vintage that was known for drinking young. It was good. I mean, this is approachable and young.
I second the motion.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
So, so tell us a little bit about, here the film comes out. I find out, geez, I'm in a film that's called the Perfect Vintage, and you started getting this in a lot of film festivals last year. Not the easiest year to be at film festivals, but you did it. Yeah. And you started winning all these awards. What was that process? How did you get in? How did you know that let's just do this?
Well, it was. First of all, the film took a long time to make, right? Obviously, because we shot 2013 and followed my brother for that year, as well as many other winemakers. But then we waited through the barreling process and the bottling process, and then till it was released to the public 3 years later, and the scoring system. So we talk about that in the film as well. So it's what was the question?
About what the heck were you thinking putting it into film festivals and stuff?
Yeah, so the film, I had never, well, for me, this is my first time taking a film. I've worked on many films over the years as a performer or behind the scenes, all kinds of stuff. So I had never really done the film festival circuit with my own film. I'd been to some with a couple of films that I directed, but so it was really exciting to actually start getting the responses. And it did well. One of the film festivals that we got into was Sonoma International Film Festival, which is the one you heard about and mentioned earlier. The film festival process is great because there's a bunch of people there who, kind of like when winemakers get together, there's a great similarity between making a movie and making a really good bottle of wine. And it's like there's a line in the film, Rhett from Bounty Hunter says, people need to understand the number of things that had to go right to make this good bottle of wine. The same thing is true in making a film. There's so many moving parts and so many things have to go right to make that happen. So it was thrilling to get good responses. And we won some best editing awards and best cinematography awards and best film awards and audience awards. So it was kind of it was just great when you work that hard and that long on a thing, to have people receive it in a positive light is very rewarding.
Yeah. And it should have been, because this movie is amazing, you guys. This is a great documentary. It will take you to Napa Valley. It will take you to wine country. It'll take you to Sonoma County too. It'll take you to what we have in Northern California, and why we have the potential to do these things. Why we can make 100-point wines. Why we can, and like we said, you and I say it all the time. 100 points is objective. You know, like some people believe it's 100 points. Some people think it's in the 90s. Some people don't even really care about it. And sommeliers, you don't walk into a restaurant and say, "This has got 96 points." That means nothing to a sommelier. It means nothing to a sommelier.
Right.
If the food in this restaurant goes good with that wine, we'll talk.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then we're not going to talk. And it doesn't matter what the numbers are. It doesn't matter any of those things. So you have to take that into consideration. You have to understand, especially what Ian and I are saying in this movie. It takes a lot to even impress us. And it's not about the numbers. And some people will go to, great retail shops, and that number means a lot to them because someone said it. Was really trying to help them. But it doesn't mean the end-all be-all. I think that this wine, and why you'll get so much out of this movie, is because we all agree that you can do this, and Timothy did do this. But there's so many steps involved. It's like making this. Why are there this percentage of that Cabernet Sauvignon is 44%, why is 33 Merlot, and why is just 10% the Malbec, and why is the 8% Petit Verdot, and why is the 5%? Why wasn't it changed around or anything? It's based on the vintage. Yeah. And that's what you have to deal with is all these kinds of things. And I'll say one thing too. Chapelet has always been supportive of film festivals. I love these people. I love this family, and they this is a good one to pour here because it really gets the point across about what hillside farming is. Right. And
let me just jump in. There's you guys have you just mentioned that you and Ian both talking about it, but there's a great discussion in the film about what is wine scoring and what does that mean, and does it mean anything, and the fact that it's one palate or a group of people judging a wine. And they talk a lot about finding people who judge wine like yourself and aligning with somebody whose taste buds match your own. And instead of looking at the points, find somebody who, every time they like a wine, you like it too. That's your critic. That's your go-to. And then whatever the score is and whatever they're liking, that's what you do. Yeah. And there's a great conversation in the film about it that you guys have, and just so educational. I would say that a lot of people have watched the film, from wine novices to wine experts, and everybody comes away having learned something. Even the people who know so much about wines go, "Well, I never knew that." And if you don't know that much about wine, clearly if you're watching this channel, you probably know a bit about it. But it's some great conversations that really cover that.
Especially with the winemakers that are involved, and I give a lot of credit to Elizabeth and Angelina and the other winemakers that are part of this. That they're very important people, and they're consistent. I mean, they're going to make the best out of that vintage. The vintages aren't always the best. There's only one in every 10 years, if we can say that. Sometimes there's two that you just go, wow, what a vintage that was. There's things like we had the 1997 vintage was, oh God, the greatest vintage ever. And then the 1998 was pretty much panned on. And you know what? It wasn't like that at all, to be really honest. And I was a magazine that did that. But the fact is that the 97 was going downhill. And that 98, you know what it had? It had acid. And it had things that could keep it going like this. And that was kind of a big deal to me. That was where I really realized that it might be panned on, but that does not mean that it's bad, and that the winemakers took another step. They used techniques that they don't usually use, but they could do it if they really tried. And I always compare that vintage, that 98 vintage, and just like the 2011, if you really taste those wines, I compare them to the Beastie Boys. And the Beastie Boys, the Beastie Boys songs and everything like this.
They had to fight for their right.
I was in Paris one time, and I got a copy of the Beastie Boys instrumental album where they played the guitars and they played the drums and they did that. You know what? It's an amazing album. It's not what you expect, but it's so cool to listen to sometimes. And so those are those kinds of vintages. They're off vintages, but they're still great. I would just be pairing these wines with different foods. I would be telling a different story about these vintages. Whereas the ones that are the most cherished vintages, like the 2013, which you got on camera, which is unbelievable.
So lucky.
Is one of those ones that it's not just the next 10 years you'll tell stories. You'll tell stories about this vintage for 50 years or until we pass on and until these wines are actually gone, because they are collectible items and they're really, really special. And sharing them with friends, and I think this is what I got the most out of this kind of hardship time that we all went through called 2020 and the pandemic and all these things, is just how important it is to share great wines with great people, that friends of yours where you can tell these stories, and you can use a reference now to an amazing movie, which is wonderful, and you need to make them watch this movie too. Just like I hope you guys are going to see this movie at some point when it comes out in the theaters, this spring, as of March 22nd. It's coming out.
Yeah.
But it's about really just kind of remembering why this vintage was so special. And you can learn a lot about that vintage if you watch this movie.
Yeah, and a lot about wine and winemakers. And I think the thing that strikes me most of all, when people say, what's your movie about? I say it's about a vintage that happened to be perfect, that happened to score perfect with Robert Parker, for whatever that's worth. But it's learning about the people behind the bottle of wine and the passion that drives all of you guys who have dedicated your lives to love in the bottle and sharing information about that and talking about that. So it's a real deep dive into what makes all of you guys tick.
Yeah.
Hey, question for you.
Yeah.
Did you ever try to make wine?
I have never made wine. And, I go back to my time at UC Davis. I was not in the wine school with Timothy and, Elizabeth and all these other cool cats. I was teaching them about music. So I was the music critic there. So all of those winemakers that go, Sawyer, how did you teach me about Pixies? The Pixies were so good. And that's what I did to them. Did I play an instrument? No, I did not. I've never played an instrument. I've never made wine. But I am who I am because I've followed the people that are so great at these professions, that are so good, that my job as a journalist and as a sommelier is to really capture these moments.
Interesting, yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this show, and you can find this movie out there, The Perfect Vintage. And
yeah, if you go to the I'll give you the website, aperfectvintage.com. aperfectvintage.com. There all the information about where you can view it, see it, download it, buy it, watch the trailer. Make sure you'll enjoy it.
You got to watch the trailer.
Yeah, there's some great people in there. Some Bertus Van Sile and Angelina. Who else is in there that we have? The Rubiceau Vineyard.
Yeah, the Rubiceau. Like a lot of different vineyards that are really important. They all played the impact that Timothy had. I mean, you're going to get into Timothy's psyche, a great winemaker of Napa Valley, but you're going to get into his psyche. He's a very loving, wonderful man who he checked his ego in at the door. He never had an ego. Like he's just he loves wine so much, and you can see the passion here. It's a passion project, and I think everything's a passion project for me. It's like working with you on that was passion, and believing in Timothy and him saying, Chris, my brother's really doing a real movie here, and please be a part of this. And of course I will. But it's about how important this is to all of us. And when you get a finished product like the 2013 vintage, you sit there and throw your hand and your fist in the air like it can happen, and you'll see why it happened. And I think this is an amazing film.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I'm so excited that the world gets to see it starting March 22nd.
Me too. Well, cheers to that. Let's finish off this bottle.
Okay.
And I look forward to you guys all coming back to see me on the Varietal Show. Nice to see you again. Please tune in next week, and we'll have more fun together. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, brother.
You got it.